Hi, I'm Eva Mezo, a minister at First United Church in Waterloo. The Old Testament story is where Eve and the serpent are talking about this special tree with this beautiful fruit on it, and the fruit looks so good. But God has told Eve not to eat from it. And the serpent is sort of saying to her, yes, but this fruit, if you eat of this fruit, then you will know about good and evil. You'll be wise. And so Eve thinks to herself, well, maybe it would be a good thing to be more wise, like God. And so she tastes of the fruit and she shares some with Adam. And the next thing they know, their eyes are wide open and they notice that they're naked. They sort of quickly make some clothes to cover their bodies. Is it because they're embarrassed? Is it because they feel terribly vulnerable? We don't know. Sometimes things happen and there's no going back. There's no way of unknowing or undoing. It reminds me of my younger brother Peter. When we were growing up, we had a succession of yellow budgies, and we always called them the same name, Pitu, which is a diminutive of Stephen. And I don't know what my brother was thinking, but he somehow managed to pull one of the primary feathers out of Pitu's tail. And he deeply regretted this when he saw how Pitu was struggling to fly. And so he then went about trying to glue it back on. And of course, it didn't work. There's no way of undoing what he had done. During this time of Lent, this is the first Sunday of Lent, we are taking this time to look within and to examine ourselves, but also to examine our relationships. And as a congregation, we're looking at examining and reconciling broken relationships. And we're identifying our relationships with our First Nations brothers and sisters as a place that needs our attention and our care. We have started acknowledging the land every time we gather for worship. And so we took some time today to look at what exactly we mean by acknowledging this piece of land. And so the Haldeman Tract is an agreement under Treaty number 3 that First Nations people would have land 6 miles or 10 kilometers on either side of the Grand River. Frederick Haldeman in 1784, on October the 25th, had signed the papers saying that this land would be used for the purposes of the Six Nations people. And so now our eyes are wide open. Now we see why it is that every time we meet, we must acknowledge this land. We must acknowledge that the land that we are gathering on is a land that has been given to the people of the Six Nations. And so we're being invited, we're being challenged to reconcile that which is broken. In the gospel story, Jesus is being tempted. He has been fasting in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. And when the devil appears and tempts him with some bread, Jesus responds and says, we do not live on just bread alone. Jesus understands what it is that we need. We need to feed our bodies, but we also need to feed our souls, our minds, our spirits. We need to nurture ourselves. And then the devil goes on and tries to tempt him to throw himself down from a high pinnacle to see if God will save him. And Jesus says, no, that is not the way. We do not play games with God. We do not test God. We do not see what kind of magical tricks God can do. God invites us into an authentic relationship, a relationship of trust, a relationship of caring. And then thirdly, the devil tempts him by saying, I will give you all this power. All you have to do is bow down and worship me. And Jesus says, no, that is not the way. Your way is not the way. I know the way. I know the way to wholeness. I know the way to love, toward humility and justice. And I choose to center my life in that. We all love a good recipe. We like to be told exactly what to do, at what time, what to look for. A book I was reading, the author was sharing that growing up, her Ukrainian grandmother cooked for their family, and when she was a teenager, she decided to take a home ec class, and when she prepared something that she'd made in this class and gave it to her grandmother to taste, her grandmother had spit it out. And her grandmother said, I will teach you how to cook. And what she learned from her grandmother was, in order to truly cook, one has to pay attention. One has to use all of their senses. One has to taste it, smell it, look at it, feel the texture of what one is preparing. And it is through that relationship with the food that whatever it is that you're creating comes into being. And so in a way, Jesus is giving us a kind of a recipe, something to guide us on our way to reconciliation, to right relationships. Jesus is urging us to nourish ourselves, to have authentic relationships, and to act with integrity, with oneness. And so the question is what are our next steps? What do we do next? What is that next best thing that we can do? Maybe it's coming to the study that we're hosting here at First, Monday night at 7 o'clock, talking about gender and sexuality in the Bible and the Christian community. Or perhaps on a Tuesday, if you're here for the noon hour concerts and you're in the lobby and you notice that there's somebody coming up the stairs from English at First, where they're learning how to speak English, maybe it's engaging with that person and having a brief conversation so they can practice their English. Or maybe it's going to the library or your local bookstore and taking out a book about First Nations communities and our relationships with them. Or going to a restaurant where we can't pronounce the menu items correctly. Or where when we look around, we don't see clones of ourselves sitting at each and every table. God invites us all to do the next best thing. Amen.